now. Okay, here we go. All right. And that the media may be present for all or part of the meeting. At this time, please mute all background devices and we will begin. Thank you very much. Okay, so call to order the Wednesday, February 17th, 2020 meeting of the City Council and Board of Education Ad Hoc Committee. We have a quorum present. Joe DeLucia, City Council, Mark Betancourt, City Council, Heather Romansky, BOE Chair, Tricia Staley, BOE, Singh Khalsa, BOE, Carlene Sharmalis, BOE, Christine DeSazio, BOE, Dr. Christian Stringfellow, the Norwich Public Schools Superintendent of Schools, and John Solomon, the City Manager, all present, as is Josh Pothier, the City of Norwich Comptroller. Okay, that was a lot in one breath. Okay, so item 2. Of course, I would put it down. There we go. Item 2 is the review of the committee scope and purpose, seeing as that we have not met since last budget season. Thought I would just review this quickly and have it on the record. The committee will be of assistance to both the council and the Board of Education in setting financial provisions for education. The committee will promote useful communications among the participants. The committee will seek such information and assistance as the committee deems appropriate with any appropriations made to it. The committee will use the meetings to develop a working understanding among all members regarding the statutory and charter requirements relative to financial provisions for education and the developing of budgets for public school districts in the state of Connecticut. We seek a working understanding of all the funding sources available to a public school district in the state of Connecticut, whether or not such are currently utilized by the City of Norwich. We also seek a working understanding of developing issues regarding school choice and its implications for a public school district in the state of Connecticut, and to provide the members of this ad hoc committee with an opportunity to communicate, share information and ideas, and to collaborate regarding the means by which the city may best meet the financial provisions necessary for educational needs in the City of Norwich. This committee is not intended, nor shall be used, to usurp, supplant, restrict, or hinder the Norwich Board of Education or the Council of the City of Norwich in the exercise of their respective legal and legislative duties relative to the funding of education through the adopted budget and the expending of the same for purposes of education. And that is from the resolution that created this committee, dated the 22nd day of January 2020. Thankfully, that is the only time I should have to read that. Okay. So we are.
So I can't figure out how to virtually raise my hand. And yes, I recognize that I work in technology and I should know how to do that, but I'm a Google Meets person.
Yeah, I've been juggling 3 different platforms and I lose stuff all of the time. So I believe if you
click on participants and then
click on participants, yeah, there you go. Right.
Click on you and then click on more, and then it'll give you the
So when I click on me and on more, all I have is rename, which I did lovely, and put BOE next to me. I have no other option.
Try clicking on the right-hand side of the screen.
Clicking on the right-hand side of the screen.
And that'll bring up a bar on the bottom.
Yep, I thought it was down there too. Is it in reactions?
No, there should be a bar on the bottom.
Yes, for me, it's under reactions. I have it now.
Yep.
Look at that. You can teach a woman to fish.
My woman is sitting right next to me, so I ain't even going there.
I'm not saying a word. I have a daughter. She's smarter than me, and I admit it. Okay, so
I actually.
You have your hand raised. So.
I do actually have my hand raised. I think I'm supposed to say my name when I speak in a virtual meeting. I think you said that. I'm sorry. So Heather
It might have
Romansky,
been
Board
my
of Ed.
husband in the background.
So Mark, you
He's in a
maybe,
Zoom meeting right next to me.
Mark,
Oh,
maybe
sorry. Yeah.
want
I'm
to mute? Oh,
There
thanks.
we go.
That's super distracting for me. I can only manage one conversation at a time.
sorry, the other meeting going on.
So
Go ahead.
I'm asking a legitimate question. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just going to preface
would-
it with that.
I would
So-
never think that.
Prepare your heart.
Okay.
So you just read that very lengthy description of the purpose, and I have had several, yes, lengthy, several conversations with not only members of the budget subcommittee, the Board of Ed budget subcommittee, and some other board members who are not on the budget subcommittee, because it's a popular topic for the Board of Ed, you might imagine. So lots of board members attend those meetings. And it is starting to feel like us that meeting, those meetings, and these meetings are very repetitive. It feels like we're duplicating efforts. Now I recognize the city council folks that are our liaisons on the budget subcommittee are not the same people who are on the ad hoc committee, and I think I think we have the same folks here from the Board of Ed. So I'm trying to be efficient, and I'm trying to not duplicate effort if we can do that somehow. And I mean, I listened to all that you read, and honestly, I was surprised when in one of our meetings last year, we, some of those meetings got a little contentious, and I think we Board of Ed got to a point where we were like, okay, well, help us figure out where to cut because we're out of ideas. And the answer was, we can't. We're on the city council. That's your job. So I think, and maybe it was just me, but I was a little surprised by, I was surprised by that answer. I'll just leave it at that. And I know one of our main goals in the beginning was transparency. And from my perspective, right, we are in Munis now. And so we're on the same platform. We were not for years, right? So I get that transparency was a thing. It was hard to figure that out. But I think we've addressed that, thankfully, because the city council put the financial resources behind Munis to make that happen. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking because everybody's eyes are glassing over.
Well, so it sounded to me like there were three things there. I'm going to take them in reverse order in which I think I heard and understood them. First, the members of the council and the members of the council that are on this committee do not daily, or I will say in my case, ever delve into Munis. Any information that's coming from Munis is being provided to us by either the comptroller or the city manager. So to have to say that we're on top of that day-to-day stuff, that's first of all, it's not a role, but it's also would be nearly impossible for us to have that day-to-day knowledge of that. In the idea of transparency, to me, because I was one of the authors of this resolution and creating this committee, I will tell you that it wasn't so much about the transparency, it was more about communication. Because forever until last year, the budget was like the Easter egg surprise. So it was the BOE budget was like the Easter egg surprise. It was like, surprise, first week of April, boom, here you go. And so the idea and the thrust behind this whole committee was that the conversations between a sampling of the city council and sampling of the Board of Ed, primarily your Board of Ed budget committee, and the superintendent and the city manager and the comptroller and the business manager, finance manager, whatever you're going to do with that position, those communications would happen early so that it would be a higher degree of understanding as we start to we start to look at the budget. Because historically what would happen is we would get John's first presentation of the budget and it would just have a BOE number in it. But you guys were still working on the budget. And unless we attended the budget meetings, right? And even if when we did, when our liaisons do, we didn't really have a clear understanding of what your whole process was. So the idea behind this was just to have us all in a room, a video, a virtual room, right? The comptroller, the city manager, and all of us, and hear all of the same information at the same time. I understand that it's repetitive for you, all right, and I'm not discounting that. But I would also say, keep in mind that this is the city council members starting very early on the budget process. Normally the budget process for us, other than conversations on the side, did not happen until the first week of April. And now here we are, middle of January, and we're already engaged. And that's supposed to be a positive thing. That was the idea, that engaging the council and hearing all of the information in one setting about how the Board of Ed budget's coming together was valuable, and is valuable. On the first thing that you said, which is the thing I'm going to tackle last, I know that I expected that there was going to be spirited conversations, right? You said contentious, I'd say spirited conversations, and I think a lot of maybe the contentiousness was born out of the fact that the three of us really did not have a good grasp of how the education budget gets put together from the ground up, because by the time we normally see it, it's pretty close to being done. So I think that some of the frustration from that inability to get our brain and get our hands around that process as the time ticked by, may have changed, I'd say the tone and the ways certain things were said, or maybe they were interpreted, whether intended or not. My hope is that we can avoid that this year, because we all have a greater understanding of how the whole process works. However, to that point about us saying, well, we can or we can't tell you what to cut. The city council cannot tell you, right, what to cut. All right. The three of us do not represent a majority of the city council. That's why there's only three of us here. We're really here to ask the questions, and it would be a fair question for me to say, well, could you cut this? And then the superintendent would respond, right? Or the board members would respond. But it's not for us. It's not within our authority to say, cut this, or I could say it and you could ignore me, and I have no authority. So it's really about not having the authority to tell the Board of Ed what to cut and what to keep. It's really about asking questions about, well, if we have trouble affording X, Y, or Z, okay, what happens if you cut X? What happens if you cut Y? And what happens if you cut Z? And that is the level of understanding that we're trying to achieve, so that while we're looking at the entire budget, we're not down in the weeds on the budget, on the education budget only, because that's talk about contentiousness. When we start backing into May and coming up on June, that's when it really starts to get contentious, because we have legislative deadlines that we can't miss. So starting earlier hopefully improves the conversation, increases the understanding, and the whole process moves a little bit more smoothly. But it is double effort for all of us. You're right. We created a new committee. It's a new set of meetings that we all are trying to attend. And yeah, it increases the workload. But it was all in the effort to try to improve the system and improve.
And so is it the responsibility of the city council members on this committee to take the answers to the many questions that get asked in the process back and share that information with other city council members? And this is the next statement I'm about to make is purely, this is just Heather, and this was the impression that I got. So we had very many spirited discussions, as you characterize them. And then I feel like we went to our budget hearing in City Hall, and it felt like we were rehashing a lot of the same questions. And sometimes the tone was not nice. That was not directed at you, Joe.
I can
So,
take it.
but that, I mean, is that like, right? So the budget subcommittee reports out to the board in a report. We don't do committee reports now at the board meetings. We just post them, and then entertain questions if there are any. But so it is your responsibility, you, Mark, and Stacy is not here tonight, but
Okay.
so it is, right? It's your, it am I correct? Just so
Yes, I mean,
like
again,
you take that
we,
information back
right,
and share with your
and
colleagues.
we have the same meeting rules that we have to follow, but yes, as designed, Mark and I should be going back to our caucus and talking in depth about the things that we learned in these meetings. Stacy should be going back to her caucus and discussing with the members of her caucus the things that we learn in these meetings. Yes.
Okay, and I'm gonna stop talking because a lot of other people have their hands raised, so thank you very much.
No, it's a fair comment that, before we get too far into anything else. I don't know who came up first. I believe it was Singh. So Singh, you have the floor.
Well, I was listening to Heather and you as well. Originally, when this committee was formed, one of the important thing that was missing was that mutual trust. And I think the focus of this committee was to create and build that trust. And I was reading article the other day, and it said, when there's trust in the room, great things happen. Well, long story short, last in the last budget committee that we have, sorry, this ad hoc committee, maybe the results that we were expecting after all this communication, everybody has their mutual feeling that we should have gotten a better response. But we should still give benefit of doubt. I think it's still a process we should continue this year as well. And sometimes there's a communication gap as well. And we cannot blame city council members who are not liaison in our budget committee, or who don't attend those sessions. So more city council member knows what we are going through is better. If there is any other way to address this, we can do that. But if ad hoc committee is made for the sole purposes, we will at least have them convey the message to the other city council members, what we have talked about or what challenges we are going through, and what's the story behind the budget for Board of Education, or how these numbers come up. So I really expect, not taking much of your time, that this time it will be more fruitful, because of course everybody has a lot of things on their hand, and plus COVID is adding to everyone's life more work. So I look forward for all the positive inputs from everyone, and let's make it better this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carlene, I believe you were next.
Yes, Carlene Chamos with the Board of Education. I have one question, but I just wanted to acknowledge some of the statements that have been made in regards to, as we get into these meetings, thinking about the tones and how we respond to certain questions, or how we ask certain questions, will really be helpful moving forward. And I know that last year was the first time that many of us was really engaged in this budget process, and there was a lot of lessons learned and things that we, a lot of do's and don'ts. So I'm very much looking forward to this year's process. The question that I did have was around, as we continue to build a trust and communication, what that process could look like moving forward. And I wanted to get a sense in terms of like what the process is around the budget for the other city department. Board of Ed is just one of the department that a city manager as well as the judge manage. So I just wanted to get a sense about what that process looks like for the other departments.
Well, yeah, when we get down to new business item 3C, when the manager and the comptroller, hopefully are going to give us some info on the fiscal climate, they can describe the process to the entire committee briefly. I think that would be fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Mark Bettencourt, I believe you were next.
No, I was next.
Well, okay, he's nodding his head. Go ahead, Christine.
Okay, thank you. No, it's just first of all, Christine DeStacio, Board of Education. It's just in regards to the comment that Heather made about her reaction to when the city council members said that they couldn't tell us what to cut, which we all understood. What she was asking was for ideas, and right in the statement of purpose that you recited earlier, it says it right in there to share ideas. So, and I think we made it clear last year that we would entertain, and the Board of Ed members would entertain any ideas that the city council members would offer to assist us in getting the budget to where it needs to be. Of course, this year, everything is like blown up. but that I just wanted to clarify that sharing of ideas as stated in the purpose statement. We know that you can't tell us what to cut directly. So I just wanted to clarify that more. And thank you very much, Joe.
Okay, Christine, you're welcome. Mark, go ahead.
Without rehashing all last year, I think, for me anyway, part of this was establishing what the expectations of the new council were regarding the budget. So that's, and I think I certainly, we certainly did that. But there were some people that said some things that actually made me cringe, and that's pretty tough, I'll tell you. So certainly there, things could have been handled a little more delicately by some people, maybe even myself included. But I thought it was important at least to lay the groundwork for what our expectations were and the fiduciary responsibilities that we thought that the Board of Ed had. So with that all said, I think you did a fantastic job. And I think, obviously we would always like to have a 0% tax increase, but that's not, and realistically, it's probably not going to happen. But we certainly want to not do something that is going to drive the rate up excessively. So what that number is, I don't know. That's something that, the city council itself will have to hash out. But I'm concerned about the same things that we were started to be concerned about last year, a few, 10 months from ago, maybe. But it's especially with COVID. But I think by and large, though, I think this committee's focus really is communication. It may seem redundant at times. I get that. Redundant more for you because you deal with it all, the Board of Ed stuff all the time, and you're trying to rehash that to us. But the Board of Ed is 60% or something like that around there, Josh. 62% of the budget. So I kind of think it deserves a little redundancy. So, but with that said, I said we should be, working together on this to the extent that's practical. Certainly, there are other things that, we need to consider down the road that we'll be working together on. The school building committee and things like that that are going to benefit, education, I hope. But with that all said, I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time. But I just want people to know that my interest is primarily in communication and so that we all have a good understanding of where each other is coming from. So, and I think that was pretty much accomplished last year. That's all.
Fair point. Thank you very much. Tricia Staley.
Thank you. I'm really happy to communicate, but I'd really like it to be a two-way street. And to me, last year felt like a lot of questions from the council, and justifiably so, but very little input when it came to, well, what do you expect the schools to look like? What is your idea? That doesn't mean you're telling me what to do, and I tell you to go jump in the lake if you tried. But I want to hear what you're thinking as citizens if you don't feel you can do it as members of the council, because otherwise it's not really a two-way street in terms of communication. And the other thing is, two of your members sit on our budget subcommittee, or sit with our budget subcommittee. They asked a great many questions, probably more than the Board of Education members did the other night. And are you telling me that information does not get brought back to the council as a whole?
So yeah, I can answer that directly. It does come back to us, but the liaisons are, the minimum requirement is the liaisons report back to the council at least quarterly. And during budget season, that's not enough. That's not enough communication. Now, certainly we could always ask them for more information, but again, we end up with I know it feels like, well, geez, it's only middle of February. Budget season has begun, and so the questioning back and forth. I'll just I'll walk through it. I have a handful of questions. I give them to Darrell. Darrell brings them to the next BOE budget meeting, gets the responses, sends them to me. I read them and I say, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, and instead of right here in the meeting, I ask my questions, I hear the response, I ask my follow-up, and the communication process is sped up. Well, the idea was that this not become this, become a bureaucracy, but it's just an open dialogue. And your point for me is well taken about the give and take. But again, I think a couple people have already said it. Let's not have last year be the measure of how this process will always work, because this was an enormous learning curve, not only for you guys but for us. I mean, hugely, huge. We spent a lot of time, digesting the things that came out of these meetings, and so I think that this will get, as others have said, this will get better over time. But I don't want to say that we can't rely on the liaisons, because we certainly can. But can we get the information and the dialogue back and forth to happen as efficiently as possible by just having liaisons being the pipeline? I don't think so. I didn't mean to steal the floor back from you. I mean, if you have more you'd like to add.
No, I think I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, I think that was a good dialogue. I think we needed to get a few things off our chest, and I thank Heather for starting that conversation. If there's nothing else on the review of our committee scope and the conversations about the process, both last year and this, we'll move on to our new business. Item A, discussion and possible action in 2021 ad hoc committee meeting dates. As part of the emails I sent out, I sent a list of dates starting with tonight. Just to be clear, tonight is a special meeting. But moving forward, the clerk's office has told me that our meetings will be regular meetings, even if they only happen up to the end of June. So I have a meeting scheduled for March 17th, for April 21st, May 19th, June 16th, and then June 23rd. As we approach the whole end of the budget process, we might have to go back-to-back weeks. And so I would say that last one would be as needed. Can I get a motion to accept this as our scheduled meeting dates for this budget season?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, so moved by Heather Romansky. Have a second?
I think Trisha's raising her hand.
All right, Trisha Staley is seconding. Is there any other discussion on the meeting dates?
I just wanted to thank you for laying out a schedule ahead of time. It's
And,
tremendously helpful.
and I thank you for reminding me to do it. You mentioned it briefly and it stuck. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none.
Hey, wait a minute.
What?
I
Oh, you had, I'm sorry, I didn't, you know.
You can't see your
your-
hand.
Your hand blends into your background.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
can't
don't
see
know.
when your virtual
You
hand
need
is
to use the
raised.
bright yellow one or something. I'm sorry,
I'll change it.
but you have the floor. Go ahead.
Oh, just that, I just want to say that we do have a conflict with the third, the meeting in April.
We do.
Yeah, so with the Ice Arena Authority, actually. So, but I happen to chair, so. And that's a Zoom meeting also. So,
Okay.
and that runs, that's at 6. Now, I have gotten the business done within 30 minutes, so it may be, I can probably do that again, depending on what's going on. So usually it's not too much, so the responsibilities of the authority are, fairly minimal at this point. But they still need to, they only meet quarterly, so.
So could we leave it on the schedule and possibly you arrive late, or we could look at it maybe at the beginning of April if we need to change the date because of your conflict?
Well, I'm just talking about the Zoom situation will be an issue too. So.
Dr. Stringfellow, would we be able to host using an NPS? I don't have an NPS Zoom account,
Yes,
but
we could do either. We could host whatever anyone needed us to.
so Joe,
That
we
would
could
work.
Perfect.
manage the
There you go.
technical aspect of the meeting for April if that's, I know you guys only have the one line or whatever it is.
Look at that, working together already.
Yeah. All right, that'll be fine.
Okay. Circle that. All right then, well, thank you for that. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, so we'll vote by roll call. So Christine DeStazio,
Yes.
thank you. Caroline Sharmalis,
Yes.
Singh Khalsa,
Yes.
Trisha Staley,
Yes,
Heather Romansky,
Yes.
Mark Betancourt,
Yes.
and Joe DeLucia votes yes. It is unanimous. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0.
Mr. DeLucia, would you like me to have Amber Ritigliano set up that April meeting?
I think that we might as well, and then we don't have to worry about juggling it later on. And Mark knows that he can schedule his meeting. That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll take care of that tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. All right. Item 3B under new business discussion, anticipated items of focus for the Board of Education budget. So Amber sent to me the documents from Dr. Stringfellow's presentation, I believe it was, to the Budget Committee. I forwarded them to the City Council members. I would like to turn the floor over to Dr. Stringfellow and just to give us the highlights as they stand right now.
Sorry, I was not anticipating that you were going to do that. I apologize. I thought that what you meant by that is that you were going to share with me the big ideas of the of your needs of me for the upcoming budget, but I can do a thumbnail sketch.
We need to improve our communication, and that's on me. Oh,
No, that's
good.
okay.
That
We're
is,
all juggling
that
a
is
lot right now, and
yeah, I would have been, it would have been no trouble, and it's my fault. I didn't just send you a quick email to say, hey, can you just give us, 5 minutes of the high points for this year's budget?
sure. I would say that while we're speaking about communication and cooperation, that our relationship with NFA has been incredibly productive. I think that Chair Romansky would echo that with her participation at their board meetings, and also with Mr. Joyner. I have a very good working relationship with Dr. Kelly, and together we have, certainly don't want to speak for him, but from my perspective, together we seem to have a shared interest in supporting Norwich resident children preschool through high school and beyond. And that feels very good. And we are working together quite nicely. So I think that will, some of the miscommunications that may have come up last year had to do with not really having a good sense of what NFA's plans were or what our expectations were, and we have many meetings, so I think we're in a better place to be able to share that with both governing bodies this year around. As you know, NFA's tuition it's such a large portion of our budget that matters quite a bit. I will say that I think you have a sense that our business manager is resigned, and Josh has generously helped us tomorrow to conduct some interviews, and we're hoping that we will be able to have a business manager join us for these lovely discussions. That would be helpful. Last year we didn't have a grants manager or an assistant superintendent, so I'm feeling like God has intended for me to do these without a full team. But your patience and understanding of the fact that we are not a full team right now will be helpful until we can become a full team. But we have a really great handle this year on the number of staff we have and where they're paid from, and that wasn't something that I could say to you in all honesty last year. I remember sharing that very transparently with you all, that was an area that we were working on. We now have a very good FTE database that I can trust. The difficulty this year, and someone, perhaps many of you mentioned it already, is the fact that COVID has made it an unusual year. And so usually budget discussions on the part of the Board of Ed are predicated on a look to enrollment, a look to from really a 3-year rolling average of costs, being able to foreshadow what next year's costs will be based upon enrollment and staffing and healthcare and transportation. And all of that was really unusual last year and this year. So that will still remain an area of difficulty to predict. There are some staff members that we had this year, like the CNA health aides that worked in the quarantine areas, that we hope to not have next year, not because they're not terrific, just because we hope to not have to quarantine anyone. And so we have a list of those personnel that won't be with us next year. We certainly planned for more custodial overtime because we had just cut custodians, and then cleaning became a significant need in the COVID pandemic. Bus transportation costs have been unusual with going from remote to hybrid, and even some of our interventionists, after school coordinators and whatnot have been unusual. So I would have liked to have been able to say, this is how many staff we had next year, and this is exactly how many staff we'll have next year and the year going forward. It's going to be a little more complicated to explain to you, and I hope for your patience, because they won't be the same staff in the same buckets. and it won't be as linear of an explanation. The good news is we, wrote for and got a lot of grants that helped us with those COVID gaps. We were not a district that had a one-to-one technology notion, to be honest. There was not a plan for technology for staff members or for students, and that was thrust upon us. We have, I believe, used our COVID funding, as I know the city has also used their COVID funding well, and we've thought down the road as to how we could invest this money so that kids could get a benefit from it now and for the long run. I see, and I'm happy to share with you how those monies were encumbered and spent. With the ESSER 2 money that's coming, we know that that is has been brought to our door so that kids can have a time of recovery in their learning, recovery in their social emotional health. It's not meant to plug budget gaps, and I want you to know that we won't be foolish enough to use it that way. That would only lead to a structural budget deficit, and there will be very few employees hired with the use of that money. It would only be folks that we had planned to hire over a period of 2 or 3 years, like the reading teachers and changing interventionists into math specialists, etc. And so you can have confidence in that. And other than that, I look forward to having these meetings with all of you. I feel like I know you a whole lot better than I did last year, and hopefully, other than not anticipating Mr. DeLucia's question this evening, I hope to do better by you in the subsequent meetings.
Still my fault.
It's not.
Thank you for that. I would just like to say, and I know that, I emailed you and I emailed Heather about the wild, just unimaginable success of the residency officer and what that has done for you in terms of dollars. And I know that was something that, you advocated for right away. You saw the need for that, and you were absolutely right. And you and the board get my, not only my thanks as a taxpayer, but also my admiration for, seeing that, making it happen, and turning it into such a success. I know that Mr. Peckham is doing, or it seems from what I hear, he's just doing an absolutely great job, which I'm not surprised because, just another outstanding Norwich employee that just, changed his focus and still, doing a wonderful job. So I'll say this last bit as delicately as I can. It is my full intention that you will not be penalized for that success. That happens sometimes with Board of Ed budgets. You say, oh, you did a great job. You saved $1 million. Now we can give you $1 million less on the other side of this. It's like, well, wait a minute. So now, you just penalized us for doing a great job. You have my commitment that to resist any movement in that direction, because I believe that we should reward successes. You built a success, and that money that's being saved should be turned right around and put right back in the classroom to benefit kids. And that's where I stand on that. So not only do you get my congratulations and my admiration, but also my commitment not to, to take away anything that you work so hard to build.
Thank you. And we'll keep doing that. So there are lots of efficiencies that we've gained and more to come. And so, I will continue to try, my team will continue to try to use the taxpayers' money as invested in education as wisely as we possibly can. We understand that it's difficult for folks in their property taxes. It would never be our intention to take advantage of that. And so it's not, we're not one and done. We have lots of other ideas and things that we've been working on in order to get more effective and more efficient as we go forward and partner with the city.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any questions from Mark or I know the board members are free to ask questions anytime. So anything for the superintendent before I move on? Seeing a lot of notes. Thank you for that.
She's way too busy for us right now.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. Okay, so if nothing else on that, we'll move on to item C, which is the city manager / comptroller report on the fiscal climate for the upcoming budget. However, John, if I could ask you to just give us a brief outline for the benefit of the entire group of exactly how the budget process comes together between now and the point that the city council adopts a budget.
I can do that. If you look at the budget as 100%, we're probably at the 50% point at this point. We have all the expenditures analyzed, and we've met and re-met with all the departments. The last thing that we normally do before we put it together is look at revenue. Now, revenue is a little tricky this year because of the coronavirus situation. It's also tricky because of the governor's proposed budget and the grants that are proposed there kind of use the revenue figures, especially in the ECS funding, where they hold it flat in the funding, but they make it up in federal money, which is a one-shot deal for the state, but puts us a year or two behind what the phase-in is supposed to be. So I'm not sure in the long term that's going to be beneficial to the city. Middle of March, we're pretty much finished with it. We do final numbers, and at the end of March, we begin March Madness and April Madness at that point. And we can, let's see, are you still there? Yep, I got a cellular warning there. So at the same time, we're doing the capital budget. As you know, that's 2% of the budget for the city as a whole. That's a moving target because if the budget goes up, the capital budget goes up. We're in the process of doing that. We wait to get the Board of Ed number. As I've said before, I studiously do not look at their budget as what's a projection of reductions that I could make based on actual projections of programs, things like that. I look at it more as from 30,000 feet up of how I can plug it into our budget to come in with a tax rate that's palatable to the citizens and the council, and palatable is in the eyes of the beholder, as you know, on this. So it's always one of the more tricky points. I've always been asked, well, why did you cut 2% or 3% or 500,000? And my answer is that I try to reduce it based on what I think that the city can afford. So it's a macro more approach, but at the same time, I do it within what I think is a fiscal responsible number. So April, we have our public hearings with the council on the budget. That continues into May, and then early June, we have to finalize our budget. Our charter says we need the budget completed by the second Tuesday in June. So we're about 50 to 60% finished. I'm cautiously optimistic. Our revenue for this year is coming in about what we projected. We're getting the grand list at the end of February rather than the end of January because of coronavirus and some staffing issues that have been, we've got full staff back now. It'll be kind of flat. It won't be reduced though. There was some a fear that we would actually lose ground in the grand list. We don't see that. So it's a pretty straightforward budget, not a lot of increases. We have to figure out what we do. There is a multi-million-dollar grant to the city. We have to see what the restrictions of those are. It is a one-time grant from the state through the federal government. And my inclination is to not do it for operating programs, but one-time boosts, either to accelerate pension payoff, debt payoff, or for one-time capital projects. But that's still being considered. And also, as you know, last night we spent a marathon session on looking at the fire study. And I have to decide what I'm going to put into the budget that's related to the fire study. And so those are the kind of the last minute type of things I'll be looking at in the next few weeks. I hope that wasn't too ragtag, but want to give you kind of a overview on that. I'm good. I can't hear you, Joe.
Yeah, that's my fault.
Okay.
No, thank you for that. That's that's exactly what I was looking for, a budget process. I just at this point would like it up to open it up to either you or Josh on you say the revenues projections are right where they're at, grand list is right where they're at, but there's any other information or detail that we should know at this point?
Yeah, Josh has some thoughts that he wants to portray. Josh, why don't you go ahead and give those thoughts?
Sure. So John covered some of it already. The grand list, we're waiting on those numbers, but they are not expected to be, very much higher than they were last year. Our tax collection rate is on target. We use a 3-year rolling average when we're budgeting for tax collection rates. So that should be pretty much the same next year. The state revenues are flat, except for the one-time revenues that the city is receiving. Some of it is coronavirus relief funds, and there's some sort of restrictions on that, but we're trying to get more clarification on what those are. Our conveyance tax, building permit, and recording fees revenues are up. That could be, they're not large dollar items, a couple $100,000 one way or another, but what they can be is kind of a bellwether for what's going on with the local economy. It could be that this is interpreted as the housing market is heating up as a result of the pandemic and people wanting to move out of more densely populated areas and telecommute. And if that is what's happening, then I think that could be a good thing for long-term growth in the grand list. However, if the housing market is heating up merely because interest rates are extremely low, then that could be a harbinger of what happened in the mid-2000s with the housing bubble. Low interest rates, people paid too much for houses they couldn't afford. And, we know who that ended up. So hopefully it's the former and not the latter, but that's just something to consider. Our interest income is obviously down. It's low everywhere. On the flip side of that, we were able to take advantage of low interest rates and refinance some debt last fall, which saved about $400,000 between us and Norwich Public Utilities. The governor's budget includes a proposal for graduated increases in conveyance taxes, and that additional revenue is earmarked for things like dealing with climate change and open space management. There's also a proposal to legalize recreational marijuana starting in May 2022, which could provide us some more revenue a couple of fiscal years down the line, but nothing that would impact us next year. So that's about it in a nutshell.
Okay. Any
I did
questions?
forget, I did wanted to add one thing I didn't add, and that's probably something that's going to happen that will have a direct effect in potential revenue and a direct effect in employment, and that's casino gaming and sports gaming. That seems to have a lot of momentum this year, and there's a good chance that that will happen. That's good for us locally. It should stabilize some of the employment and revenue figures that the casinos are doing. It certainly will be a line item where they can increase their income. Obviously, they've taken a big hit. We receive, as a host community, a larger share of casino revenue, so there's a potential for that to increase in the years going forward. So between stabilizing our local economy and potential for more revenue, that's some good news, I think.
Oh boy. All right, does the committee have any questions for John or for Josh?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Anyone else?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to acknowledge the overview of the state of where we are at as a city, and it's really good context going into our future conversation. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you both for that. Okay, so if nothing else on that, we'll move on to item 4 on our agenda, which are it's just a list of agenda items for future meetings. There's a couple, actually they're going to be will be on our next agenda. One thing, I sent an email out to the entire committee, and I've made a note for myself as an item for future meetings, is we are in need of a recording secretary. So before I asked the city manager's office to provide us with one, I wanted to take one more, stab in the barrel here to see if there's anybody that's already on the committee that is willing to take on that task. You don't have to answer me right now. I won't go for the hard close, right? Right. But in the next couple of days, if you think that you might want to take up that task, just shoot me an email and we could talk about it. But just please keep that in mind before I make that formal request. As I said, I just made a list of the things that were off the top of my head. This is not the all-inclusive list. If there are things that that the rest of you would like to see on our upcoming agendas, aside from what I've put here, feel free to speak up. Okay, well then we'll leave it as is, and every meeting there'll be an opportunity on the agenda to talk about things that we would like to talk about at maybe at the next meeting. So this is not a one and done part of our agenda.
Could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Just Kristen, Yeah, somebody was kind of rudely said, called into the city council meeting there and mentioned the 2.7 million in savings there, or, in the changes in enrollment due to the investigator. And, but is anything being done? Are you aware of any, as far as like either any criminal prosecutions or anything like that happening with these people? Or trying to recover any of the
I'm sorry,
monies
I don't
the-
know what you were talking about. Are you talking about the Ed Peckham residency
Right.
officer?
Right.
Okay, so,
So someone called
Is-
into a city council meeting,
yeah,
cited the dollar amount that was, I believe in the paper, was
Right.
2.7 million.
2.7 million, yeah.
And said, where's that money going? And how come these people that are doing this aren't being arrested?
so my understanding, I'm certainly not in law enforcement, but my understanding is that there is no way to criminally prosecute. However, I have we didn't have a way of proving residency when I met you. And so we enacted a registration procedure, which includes proving residency in the state legal way. Sometimes folks don't live in a domicile where they're paying rent or they're paying a mortgage on their own and they're living with someone else. So for example, if my adult son were living with me, then I'm not sure what happened in the past, but what happens in the future is that I, as the homeowner, or as the landlord, would have to sign an affidavit, a legal document saying that my son lived with me, and if he was fibbing, I would be taking personal responsibility for that fib. And so we have those documents on file at this time. It wasn't something that was the case previously. What we've found is that it deters the fibbing, because they're sure that by signing this document that was drafted by our legal team, they could be on the hook, so to speak, for falsifying residency documents and having us pay tuition or hire staff to support a false residency claim. But to be honest, in our first year at this, people were taken by surprise that they had to prove residency, particularly folks who were registering for high school. And so Ms. Romansky was Chair Romansky, excuse me, was a parent who for the first time now is going on to 9th grade. We asked those parents to prove residency before we paid their tuition bill. And you can't imagine, well, I'm sure you can. We got a lot of, I personally got a lot of interesting phone calls. I've lived here forever. I've never proved residency. I know that you haven't, sir, because we have no documents on hand for you. So our first blush at this was really to establish who lives here. But in subsequent years, you are going to see us calling people to task and perhaps litigating against homeowners and landlords who are falsifying documents. It's not true, and they should take that very seriously if they're asked to put their name to a document for someone who doesn't live there.
How about billing other towns for tuition?
We have done that. And so that, of course, as you can imagine, I'm not the most popular friend to other superintendents, because when someone doesn't live in your area, they live somewhere else. And so we have had to have those type of discussions. And the big idea is always about educating the child and making sure that the child doesn't their educational process doesn't get jeopardized by the business of adults. And so once it was made clear to my colleague superintendents that we were actually measuring this and looking for this, they've now grown accustomed to our procedures. But it was just like proving residency as a 9th grader was was a change. This has been a change, and change is difficult for people. I will say we will not be able to fully implement it. I think it was a city council member at our budget meeting of the Board of Ed that asked, like, when will this be over? Like, you know, you've done it now. Is it done? This is a perpetual management. Folks move in and out all the time. And I can't imagine it being done, but it's certainly not fully implemented yet. I don't have a plan to fully implement it this year with all the changes. I wouldn't come to you and ask for an additional position, but in order to fully implement it, we have to have folks that are managing the high school tuition process, managing the proof of residency when you come on board, and then the every year proof of residency. So it's that last one that we don't have a handle on yet because we don't have the staff to manage it. But in most other urban districts and most other districts, folks are asked to prove residency every year. And that's a function that comes with some automaticity. We're not close to doing that yet, but that is our overall plan.
Anything else, Mark?
No, thank you. That pretty much covers it.
Thank you for that. So still under item 4, before we adjourn, I just want to let the committee know that on our agendas moving forward, there will be an opportunity for public comment. Okay, so you'll see that on our agenda. Okay. And with that, I will say that our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 17th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. I fully anticipate that will be a Zoom meeting. And with that, I'll entertain.
So you're not bringing corned beef and cabbage?
Well, I'll eat some in front of you, and then
I'm disappointed.
Yeah, right. Okay. I know that's you know that's
Oh, no. I'm fine meeting that night.
Of our population, but
I have linguine with clam sauce for pasta fresca.
I'm just gonna say, you know, as us old football coaches say, the train don't stop. So here, so with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made and seconded. Okay. And again by roll call, Christine DeStasio.
Yes.
Carlene Journalist.
Yes.
Singh Khalsa.
Yes.
Tricia Staley.
Yes.
Heather Romansky.
Yes.
Mark Betancourt.
Yes.
And Joe DeLucia votes yes, unanimous 7-0. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much for your time. I'm sure we'll see you around the barn at some point and at next month's meeting. Josh and John, thank you both very much as well.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Dr. McDowell.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.